The tact and audacity is knowing how far you can go without going too far. This saying is absolutely true for Ukraine's recent victory in Kharkiv. We'll break down Ukraine's devastating new tactic against Russia in detail here. If you like what we say, check out our other videos and subscribe to our channel, Military Future, for more such content. Now let's understand how Ukraine strategically liberated Kharkiv and gave Russia an embarrassing defeat. Number 1. Ukraine was strikingly victorious in eastern Kharkiv attack as huge land regions were reclaimed and the Russian military was left stunned. Around Kharkiv, 8,000 square kilometers were liberated. The reason, of course, is that Ukraine caught Russia off guard. This new tactic by Ukraine could be a radical turning point in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The previous major announcement from Ukraine was their preparation for South Kherson attack. The Russian army moved its units to counter Ukrainian forces in the south, expecting an attack. But before the Kherson attack, Russian lines were struck several times and their supply units were blocked. Various storage units and bridges that supplied ammunition were blown up. With no time to recover from these attacks, the Russian army was again forced to engage in the well-anticipated Kherson counteroffensive. Number 2. On the 8th of September, Ukraine broke 3 Russian front lines, but no one expected the attacks to escalate. On the 9th of September, Ukraine launched its surprise counteroffensive in the east. This army targeted prominent Russian bases, which made them scared and frantic. The Russian lines were picked clean, partly because they were plugged with relatively less qualified recruits from Donetsk, Luhansk. But the catch was that the Ukrainian forces didn't stop to gain control of vital points and kept smashing through Russian lines. This amazing move was enough to slaughter Russian lines by the time backup arrived. And oh boy, the backup. Russia really didn't plan on having reinforcements in Kharkiv, which led to its embarrassing defeat. But more on that later. Many worldwide were skeptical of Ukraine's rash move and suggested they retreat before getting surrounded. Instead, in a brilliant demonstration of persistence, the Ukrainian army pierced deeper into Russian territories and even threatened to surround Russian troops. Although the world's skepticism didn't kill Ukraine's spirit, its sudden attack did scare Russian soldiers, who fled for their lives, leaving behind hundreds of ammunition storage units, battle trucks, and personal carriers for Ukrainian forces to claim and use. Some Ukrainian forces reported that Russian soldiers attempted to make a run for the borders in civilian clothes. Due to its consistent efforts, the counteroffensive had extended 80 kilometers beyond the Russian lines by September 10th. They recaptured important cities like Izium. In the third phase of Russian-Ukraine war, this event proved to be detrimental to Russia's supposedly flawless war strategies. It also exposed the otherwise hidden fault lines in the Russian army. Ukraine took full advantage of these shortcomings and spearheaded its counteroffensive toward the Russian border and into Luhansk Oblast by September 12th. Number 4. Let's talk about some important points that directly or indirectly contributed to Ukraine's success. After months of warfare in the Donbass region, Ukraine morale had hit an all-time low. But the Kharkiv victory will be a morale booster and a benefiting reply to those who consider Ukraine the frail underdog in this war. A couple of things worked out well for Ukraine. Let's talk about some of them. The numerous sanctions imposed on Russia severely restricted its capacity to restore damaged units or source new weapons and ammunition. The Ukrainian army was well-groomed and skilled thanks to training it received from NATO and the US. The important but often ignored reason is the commendable resolve of the Ukrainians. While the Russians are fighting for winning territories, the Ukrainian folk are driven more by the dominating characteristic of protecting one's home and family. How tricky yet powerful emotional states can be in a war is outstanding. Due to Ukraine's well-managed risks, the Russians faced their worst defeat since 1943. Ukraine hinted at the Kherson attack for months leading up to it and was silent on Kharkiv. This led Russia to become the scapegoat that Ukraine wanted it to be. All elite personnel and heavy-duty equipment were diverted to the south, and the eastern region was neglected, creating perfect grounds for Ukraine's surprise attack. Even when the weakness of Russia was considered, Ukraine was still at risk, but they did a wonderful job of managing logistics and harmonizing their defense, aviation, and infantry to counter Russian forces from all directions. The use of thunder runs. This isn't something unheard of, is it? The use of thunder runs dates back to the Civil War ages. They were called cavalry raids back then, but the best example of their modern use was perhaps in 2003 by the US in Iraq. But why are we talking about them? Well, because this has been an important new tactic. used devastatingly well by Ukraine as part of their secret strategy against Russia. But what exactly are thunder runs used for, and what do they mean? Well, we'll tell you about it in a bit. If you stuck around till now, give us a like and tell us in the comments what you think thunder runs means. Done? Now let's get back to the video. Thunder runs essentially mean getting personal into speedy vehicle and charging the enemy's territory with full force. This is done mainly to initiate some action in a stalemate-like static situation and to understand the opponent's strengths and weaknesses, causing a surprise. Charging shocks your enemy and quickly reveals their fragile points. An early example of this would be the fall of Saddam Hussein's palace in Iraq. The cerebral impact of the U.S. plunging deep into the capital totally demolished any confidence of the people on the defending end. Ukraine did something like this and knew immediately that Russian reinforcements in the east were weak. This information surged the pace and reach of Ukraine's forces beyond Russian borders and let them win back Kharkiv. Ukraine's resilience was particularly reflected in the use of civilian Ford and Toyota cars, converted into battle trucks with the help of a team of volunteers. Let's explore the strategy in detail and why it proves to be effective time and again. In October of 1993, the U.S. was trying to get targets in Mogadishu, Somalia. But things worsened for the U.S. when Black Hawk helicopters were shot and blown up, and many had to be saved by rescue efforts. These rescue operations also led to some bloodshed, making this America's most ferocious battle since Vietnam. Many U.S. troops lost their lives, and several others were injured. This incident, unfortunately, received a ton of negative attention and public backlash. It is now clear that global democracies would care to justify a high number of casualties anymore. This calls for a new invention, aka thunder runs. To date, they're quite effective for clearing an entire area, counting on pace and aggression. Of course, the use of tanks has been replaced by guns in today's battles, but the idea still remains the same. Roll through an area in a protected vehicle quickly and have minimum number of casualties. Number 5. That certainly sums up how Ukraine used thunder runs to win, but there's another question that needs answering. Was Russia responsible for its defeat in some ways? If you ask us, yes it was. The move that set Russia up for failure was taking the bait and doubling down at the southern region to defend Port City, an important territory. It seems like Putin underestimated Ukraine's strength. He probably thought Russia's weakest forces could tackle any breaches in the east, which turned out to be untrue. Russian Milblog chats were buzzing with rumors of Ukraine's forces accumulating, but Russia chose to be dismissive of these signs. It also didn't pay any close attention to having a robust reinforcements for the eastern lines. This is why Ukrainian forces kept blazing through the lines. There was no one to stop them after they got through some areas. This created a panic and terror, and Russian soldiers fled. Another thing that doomed Russia was its deficient and inferior military strategy during the attack. This feels ironic to say because, well, it's Russia. The right thing to do would have been to focus on what mattered the most and to let go other targets, but chose poorly and let the panic confuse them while benefiting Ukraine. According to the Institute for the Study of War, ISW, Russia's reaction to the conflict was reinforcing the frontline positions in Kherson Oblast and conducting ground assaults in Kharkiv City, which were inadequate in numbers. All these Russian moves pointed to a lack of internal communication within the forces. They seemed to function like separate entities with different agendas than forces serving a common goal. A particular move that proves this statement was the direction of scores of troops to Donetsk when they were most needed in Kharkiv. These kinds of decisions discourage cohesion and lead to failure in battle. And that's exactly what happened. These flaws made Russia's situation 10 times worse. And Ukraine jumped in at the right time to take full advantage of it. That's all for today. If you liked our breakdown of Ukraine's clever tactic, share this video and also check out our other videos too. Stay tuned for more military updates. We'll see you at the next one.